on, Kaitlynn. Whee!
Hi.
Our family, in a lot of ways, is no different than many, many families, and that's sad in itself.
Hey, get her.
What I feel like right now is I'm the reason why.
Somebody's not happy.
We all have flaws.
I just couldn't believe that I was taking my daughter to a shelter.
Hi, my name is Kaitlynn Stein, and I was homeless when I was 9 years old. This is my story. So I decided to start this journey to find out what really happened, because there's so much that I wasn't told growing up and that was hidden from me. And I only heard bits and pieces, and I just never understood why some things happen. Like, why did we go into a shelter? Why didn't we go to my grandmother's when we ended up at her place anyway? And I just want to know the truth.
As a single mom, supporting my daughter was a priority, of course. It was scary at times. I was afraid that I wouldn't have enough money or where the next food was going to come from on the table. It became very hard when I got sick. So I had a multiple array of testing done, biopsies and scans, and it came out to where I have scleroderma, that was through biopsy, and chronic fibromyalgia. So the doctor actually put me on all kinds of meds to, for the pain. And it became worse and worse, and I became unable to work. I wound up filing bankruptcy, as the bills were piling up. I was just drowning.
So my mom and I were cuddling in her bed because we were always together, and all of a sudden this truck pulls up and we just both got really silent, and I didn't understand what was going on because people got out of the truck and came up to the side of our house, and I was like, "Mommy, what's going on?" And she said, "Don't worry, it's gonna be okay." And they did something to the side of the house, and then all the electricity went off.
So my lawyer filed for bankruptcy, and I lost my house.
I didn't really understand what was going on. I was only 9 years old, but my mom tried to not have me notice anything that was going on.
I didn't want Kaitlynn to see me upset or scared or nervous, even though deep down I didn't know what I was going to do. It was nerve-wracking, when you have a child, you're a single parent, you're raising them, and you want to do the right thing, especially their psychological view. I didn't want her to think that she was scared and then her life was going to be a horrible story. And as I walked into the shelter, I was taking a deep breath and scared to death. I just couldn't believe that I was taking my daughter to a shelter.
It means a lot that she made sure that I was comfortable everywhere we went, because I know now that that must have been really hard for her, because anybody going into a shelter would naturally be nervous and scared, but she didn't show any of that because she really wanted me not to notice that. The shelter wasn't scary for me, really, except for one night that I remember. It was in the middle of the night, and I heard one of the mothers scream, and her 3-year-old daughter cried nonstop for a couple minutes. And when the baby wasn't being quiet, I woke my mom up being like, "What's wrong? Why is she still crying?" And my mom jumped out of bed, turned the light on, and it was that mother having a seizure. which my mom knew that that would happen because she is prone to seizures. So the other mother in the room with us called 911 while my mom tried to keep the lady alive. And I just sat on my bed watching everything happen. When the ambulance came and the EMTs came in and tried to keep her alive even more, I just watched. I wasn't scared about that. I don't think, at least. But one thing that I remember being terrified about was I saw a cockroach crawl up my chest that had my toys and crawl in there. And I refused to open it from then on, just because I was terrified of that cockroach. We didn't get to stay in the shelter very long because my mom got Social Security. So the shelter decided that we were no longer able to stay there anymore. So we had to find a place to live very quickly. So we didn't have much money. I don't know what my mom did to have to find a place so quickly when you thought that you were safe. It's just crazy. But luckily somebody at my school had a house that they were moving from, but they were renting out. So they rented us their old farmhouse, but it was very rundown.
It was scary. There were mice. I remember being scared to death of mice.
In my room, there was a hole in the wall that I was scared of because I thought a squirrel was gonna come out and attack me. There was also a possum in our trash can that my mom called my father up and told him to come over and get rid of it.
The whole floor upstairs was full, packed of bat droppings. Every time I turned around, it was like something. It was scary, and there were holes in the roof. It was just one thing after another. We had to get out of there. Had to get out of there.
It was the first time in all of this that I really felt scared.
We only had to live there because we couldn't stay at the shelter. So I wanted to go back to the shelter to figure out why we were told to leave.
They actually told me I couldn't stay because I was on Medicare. I had Medicare and Social Security, and they said you can't stay here, and they gave me a week to get out.
We did, or the Board of Social Services did?
They did here.
Doesn't sound like us now. That seems complete opposite of us now.
I was like, we were here, and I think I was waiting for another place to live. I didn't know if they were going to help us, but when they said, we're looking at your records, you actually are on Social Security, and you can't stay here, but we will give you some time to find another place, a few days to a week at the longest.
Yeah,
Doesn't sound like
sounds like a Board of Social Services
I was gonna say,
thing
it
to
sounds
me,
like
but
It
again.
was the Board of Social Services, but they're the ones that put us here.
Yeah, but you know what happens? The Board of Social Services sometimes will place you on immediate need until they're able to get the documentation, like proof of eligibility. And so if you went into their office initially, even if they did give you an immediate need referral, if you ever, maybe in a week or so, you have an appointment with them and they find out that you gotta check this month for child support for $250, they'll say, hey, you're no longer eligible.
I was really surprised by what the shelter was like when I went back. In my head, it was this huge place. It was a lot smaller. The rooms were smaller. Of course, I'm bigger now, so everything would look smaller. I don't remember it being dirty or scary, kind of. Like, it was intimidating being back there.
How was it intimidating?
I guess just to know that people who have to be there, like, they have no other choice, and that I had to be there at some point.
Now that I know what happened at the shelter, I needed to go talk to the person who will hopefully have more answers for me, my grandmother.
You sure you're up for this?
I'm just worried about everything. I don't want people to be angry with me.
We won't be angry with you. We're angry with the way the situation was that shouldn't have been, Kate. we're not even angry. We're all beyond that. You know, we're all friends. We love your mother. She obviously feels differently toward me than she did in the past. So let's just move forward. What happened, happened.
Do you remember when we went into the shelter?
I do not.
No?
I do not. I remember because Mom and Dad were divorced at that time. You were living, I knew your dad would come home and say, Tracy really is sick. She says she's really sick. And I knew at some point she lost the house. And I only got dribs and drabs because nobody talked to me at that time, and your parents were divorced. Mm-hmm. So the little bit that I heard from your dad, I think he thought with all your mom's friends or mom or whatever, that things would be okay. I mean, I really don't know, Kate. I don't know much about that time, sadly.
Yeah, so Dad told me that you both didn't want me going into the shelter.
I can't,
Yeah,
truly,
it's okay.
Maybe I blocked it from my mind.
Mm-hmm.
I truly don't know, Kate.
So maybe you did know, and you just don't remember. Maybe it was just...
I truly can't remember that, and I have a very good memory. So, I just don't know.
Is there anything, I know you guys would have took me in no matter what.
Absolutely.
But is there a reason why you wouldn't take my mom in?
Because of how she felt about me. I never knew how she felt about me. And once the divorce was final, she was no longer part of the family, you know, and we had very, very little communication.
There's just so much we could talk about, but I don't know. I don't even know where this is gonna go.
What, this right now?
Yeah, where the whole story is gonna go, because there's just so much I don't understand that happened in our family.
Mm-hmm. It's hard. It's very hard to talk about without crying. It's very hard to understand. But, you know, the sad thing is our family in a lot of ways is no different than many, many families, and that's sad in itself because we all have flaws. And the thing is to learn to forgive each other and to move on. And some people, unfortunately, in our family can't do that. So we have to find ways for all of us to move on.
My grandmother helped me understand what was going on with my family. But if I wanted to fully understand what happened back then, there was still one more person I needed to talk to. Bobby is the homeowner who kicked us out of her house, causing us to become homeless for the second time. So my mom and I flew to Minnesota to confront her.
Talked to you, but didn't see you. Now I do.
Hi.
I was so nervous to talk to her, but I needed to know what happened from her point of view.
It was good, okay? But then it got to be where your mom wanted to have you with her 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And you went to public school initially, and then you went to the private school. And you guys were with me, all of 4 months?
I think 3.
3, but she was moving you from school to school and being able to get, a lot of support when you moved to that school. But then, it was difficult because I felt like, she didn't want to deal with anything, and she was using you as a crutch or a barrier for her to finally start dealing with what she needed to deal with. And she didn't want to do that. And what happened when you guys left is your mom, then said she wanted to homeschool you. And I said, no, no, not going there.
Basically, what I feel like right now is I'm the reason why.
No, you're not the reason why. No, You really aren't. I missed you. I missed you. You know, I didn't want you to go, but I also couldn't do anything, you know, where somebody said, well, Katie wants to be homeschooled. That was never brought up for me.
When you asked us to leave, you gave us 3 days. So why did you pick 3 days?
Because that's what it is in the state of Minnesota. Give 3 days notice.
Really?
Mm-hmm. But your mother was okay with it. She didn't say, we can't do that. She didn't, you know, she said, okay, that's it. You know, and I don't know if that's what she was heading for. I didn't know if that's what she wanted all along. I'm
not sure.
I really didn't know. I just, you know, because it was like nothing, you know, as to try to give her what she wanted. It never seemed to be good enough, whatever it was.
When she said that 3 days was the normal for Minnesota, I just felt like there was nothing I could say to her to make her realize what she did.
According to Minnesota law, Bobby was actually supposed to give us at least a month to find another place.
And when I was talking to her, I heard her side, but I still was angry. I was so angry during this interview to the point where I couldn't even continue it.
Do you recall me coming to you and asking you exactly what was really going on? And you mentioned that...
You know what? I'm gonna replace me with you, okay?
Okay.
So I had my mom take over for me because she knows what was going on, whereas I have mixed memories because I was a child. So I got to hear more of what actually happened when they talked.
I remember I brought in books and I said, I'm just going to homeschool her because the kids are so smart, and I watched what they did, and you actually get together on certain days and you do classes together, and it's like a classroom setting, but it's laid back. Mm-hmm. You go on your own. I was like, I'll try anything. So I went and I got the books and started homeschooling her that day, and I think that's when I found a letter under the door. But leading up to that, I had spoken to you and said, what did this? And you had mentioned that you had a call from a friend of mine from Drum Corps, Nancy.
No, I never spoke to a Nancy.
You said your girlfriend from Drum Corps called me and said you were leaving anyway. And I was like,
maybe there was.
Oh, I slammed her. I called her up and slammed her and said, don't you? I trusted her as a friend. You know, when you vent to friends. Mm-hmm. And you know, I felt like I was in between something, that there was friction between you and Katie, and we had sat down and talked about that, and you had told me.
I didn't think there was.
Well, a lot of times Katie would feel like she couldn't do anything right around here.
Oh, no.
And she'd go right when she was raking the leaves. It was like you didn't want her to really do that.
I was surprised that you didn't fight to stay. And that's my thing, was I thought for sure, say 3 days, and they're going to have to stay longer. And then...
Well, I remember coming in here, and I said, so we're supposed to be out of here? And you wouldn't answer me. And that's when I thought, oh, okay, well then there's no conversation. We didn't say a single word after that letter. We didn't utter one word.
The next day, she did apologize to us and say that she was wrong. But I didn't really feel like I could forgive her. Just because for so long, she was the enemy. She was the person who made us homeless again. And I don't know. I know I should forgive her. I know I should forget everything that happened. I can't change what happened, but I just have a lot of anger.
We didn't have much housing stability while I was growing up. By the time I turned 10, I had moved 12 times. That number rose to 21 by the time I was 21.
When I became more aware of what was going on, I began to feel like I needed to do something to help. I saw my mom buying stuff, and it was stuff that we needed, but I felt like we should not be buying anything. And I was so scared that we would run out of money.
It got to a point where Kaitlynn would worry about money so much, she actually told me how to spend money, when not to spend money. I was getting very angry.
One time we were in the store and she wanted to buy me a belt. And I fought her in the store because I said, we can't afford it. I don't need it. And I did need it, but I didn't want to spend money.
While working on this documentary, I was introduced to Chelsea Melrath, who works at Home of the Sparrow in Chester County, Pennsylvania. She gave me insight into how being homeless could have affected me mentally and introduced me to ACEs.
ACEs stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. So it really is derived from a study that was conducted 20 years ago in the Southern California area on over 17,000 HMO members at their routine physicals. So what the researchers did was they gave these patients a series of 10 questions. Every question that they answered yes to, they scored a point. Then at the end of the survey, they summed up their points. So the ACEs scores were between 0 and 10. And then after that, they then compared those scores to later health outcomes. And so what they found was that the higher number of ACEs that you had in your childhood or trauma that you have in your childhood, the more likely that you are to develop later ill health outcomes such as cancer, stroke, diabetes, mental illness, substance abuse, anything that we would basically consider a public health crisis are correlated with our ACEs in childhood.
I didn't really think that this affected me anyway, until going back and thinking about everything that happened afterwards and during it. Before all of this happened, before we lost our house, I was in the same school for about 5 years, and I was so outgoing. Everyone knew me. And then once I started having to switch schools all the time and having to be the new kid all the time, I wasn't able to make friends as easily as I was when I was really little. And when I would, some kids would pretend to be my friend and then ditch me whenever their friends were around. So I was always alone. I felt like no one liked me. And so I had really bad social anxiety after a while. And I didn't want to be in a room full of people because I felt like no one liked me. I don't belong there because no one wants me there. In 8th grade, it became really bad, and I couldn't look at anybody in the eye. I walked with my head down, and I couldn't hold a conversation with anybody. I couldn't even be in the cafeteria because it was just too loud and I would freak out. I just couldn't handle being in school. So I got taken out of school, and teachers came to my house for the rest of the year. And my mom saw me having a panic attack one day, which I had every single night. Every night I'd cry myself to sleep, and I'd felt like I couldn't breathe. I felt like I was suffocating, and I would do anything to try to breathe, like scratching at my chest, like scratching my arms just to feel anything else besides feeling like I was suffocating. So when my mom found me having a panic attack, she took me to the hospital.
I was scared when I saw Kaitlynn scratching her arms, and even though it was a hard decision, I took her to the hospital. I was so scared she was going to take her life, and I wasn't going to lose my daughter. I just wasn't going to lose her.
But I absolutely think that those experiences that she experienced in her childhood, such as the homelessness and food insecurity and her mother's diagnoses, I definitely think that those things can be correlated back to mental health and some of the mental health diagnoses that she may be experiencing now.
Chelsea helped me learn about the ACEs in my childhood. but I'm not the only one in my family with a higher ACE score.
What the research is stating is that because ACEs or childhood trauma affects the way that our brains are developing and our bodies are developing, it actually also affects the way that our DNA is read and transcribed. And so what that means is when it affects the way that our DNA is developed or made from, it then gets passed on from generation to generation. So what they're finding is that this trauma in our lives constantly is passed down from one generation to another. And so that's one reason why it's so important to really educate ourselves on ACEs and trauma and what that means, because we're passing this on to our children. And this really is just a cycle. So unless you really address this in your life and you try your best to figure out a way to kind of process a lot of what you've been through and reorganize some of the connections in your brain, it's going to be passed down from generation to generation.
My relationship with my mother was not that good. I would have liked it to have been better. My mother, when I was growing up, was not very nice. She would yell about, you never knew when she was going to yell. If you did something wrong, you didn't know if it was wrong until she yelled. You couldn't put things in the dishwasher the right way. You couldn't clean the right way. You couldn't talk the right way. And if you talked, forget about it. Especially when she was in front of friends or other people. You weren't allowed to talk. I guess that's that thing, kids should be seen and not heard. She said that many times, many times. She has actually kicked me in the stomach. She pulled my hair, slapped my face.
I am lucky that I have a better relationship with my mom than she had with hers.
So experiencing homelessness and all of these traumas in her life, at the end of the day, she always knew that she had her mom there. And that even though she may not have been in the perfect setting or in the perfect environment, or even though she had all of these challenges, she always had her mom there and she could always rely on her mom. So having that one person in her life made the world of a difference.
From me to you, won't you say you love me?
By going back and talking to people involved in all of this, I learned that communication is key, because there was so much lack of communication that caused misunderstanding, which caused us to be homeless again with Bobby kicking us out, and caused us to go into a shelter because my mom and my grandmother didn't have a great relationship and we couldn't go with her. And she said that she didn't even know that we were going into a shelter. The communication and the hearsay is really what causes problems in anyone's life. And if we can all just learn to communicate better, maybe none of this would have happened in the first place. Today, I think I'm doing pretty well. I still have a great relationship with my mom. My relationships with my father and my grandmother have gotten better. I'm going to Drexel and getting an education, and something that my mom wasn't able to complete, and my dad never went to college, so I'm doing it. And I'm really proud of myself for doing everything I have and accomplishing what I have so far. My mom always said that this would be our last move, and that we're not moving until I'm out of college and I'm going on my own. But I never believed her, because I always knew there was another move right around the corner, which is why we didn't actually unpack all the boxes. We unpacked what was necessary, and then odds and ends were just still in boxes. And so it made it easier when we had to move again. But now today, we don't have to do that anymore. We are more confident where we're living, that we're gonna stay there longer. And if for some reason we have to leave, we do, but I am confident and comfortable where I'm living enough to actually make my space my own.
Although my mom and I were able to get back on our feet, homelessness is still a huge issue in the world.
I think the frustrating part of it is that there's a lot of people that are on the brink of homelessness, right? And so when you're talking about people in the Board of Social Services, when you go to them, they're gonna make you be homeless. Like there's nowhere else for you to go that night. You know, families that are staying with a relative because they don't have any place to go because they just got evicted is as much homeless as the guy who's living in a tent under an overpass.
I want people to learn that homelessness doesn't define you. Homelessness is not just one type of person. This is just my story. There's so many people out there with their own stories, and they may be in a hard place now, but with help from just one person, it could change their life.
Will it be always like this? Always like this? Always like this for you and me? Will it be always like this? Always like this? Always like this for you and me?
This is one of those tapes that like no one's ever gonna see. Watch it like turn into a documentary or something.